Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I'm the Athletic Geek, and I'm very excited about this week's episode because, well, later on in the week is Cape Comic Con in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and was had a great time going there last year, and hopefully gonna have a more fun memories this year. But this week, my guest is Ken Murphy, the promoter of Cape Comic Con, and we're just going to talk about everything that has made this convention what it is and what it means to the city today. So, first of all, Ken, thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
Um, so, kind of before we get started talking about Cape Comic Con, just to ask you about yourself. What got you interested in just like sci-fi and comic books and all, and even wrestling? The different things that you've brought to your community with this convention. What kind of got you interested in all of those sort of things that would later turn into a passion that you can use for a convention?
Well, I grew up in the North County of St. Louis in the 1970s, and I have been a fan of professional wrestling and comic books since I can remember, probably since the age of 6 or 7. Um, Science fiction, yes, I think comic cons they blend two different fandoms, of course, to include science fiction. I don't know that I've ever said I'm a science fiction fan, but
Fair
I
enough. Fair
love
enough.
I love I love Star Wars and Star Trek and Buck Rogers as much as the next guy.
Awesome.
Um, been a fan of comic books and wrestling my entire life. Owned a comic book store in Cape Girardeau for 13 years, from the mid 90s on uh, 2000 to 2008. I sold it in 2008, and during that time, would go to cons from a business standpoint, but more from a fan standpoint, and just knew that one day I would start one in Cape Girardeau.
So what were some of your favorite comic books and characters that first got you interested in just continuing to read those books?
So, I've been a mainstream fan my whole life. I've had a chance to grow and enjoy some independent and some smaller press comics in the last 25 years or so. But when I was a kid and through most of my young adult to middle-aged adult life, I was a fan of mainstream comics. And if it was a recognizable superhero such as a Superman, a Batman, a Hulk, a Spider-Man, uh, I was in. I love team up books. So again, they try to sell more books and get you more interested. So they create groups and teams. And I love any type of team up or group book. Um, yeah, not much I didn't like in the area of Marvel or DC. Not
Awesome.
much at all. Not much at all.
Um, so you mentioned pro wrestling because that's also a
Yeah.
big part of the convention, which is also something I finding out last year that not only in addition to comic books, but you were you know help with pro wrestling and help with Cape Championship Wrestling because I first founded this channel on talking about not only wrestling but comic books, and it's just that really resonated with me. But what were some of your early memories of professional wrestling in St. Louis?
My earliest memories of professional wrestling in St. Louis, of course, is with my dad on a Sunday morning at 11 a.m. From a time, again, from 1973. I believe Dory Funk Jr. he was entering his last year as the NWA World Champion. So I wish I would have saw more of his reign as the NWA champion. But if you grew up in St. Louis and you were, I guess, I don't know, a fan at all, you realized how special St. Louis was
Oh yeah.
in the world of pro wrestling. So for the next 10 to 15 years before I left to go to college, I was immersed in St. Louis. We would not attend live shows until I got my. I can only tell you I only saw a few cards live in the early '80s. I wish
Okay.
I would have saw more live shows in the '70s, but again, when you're just a kid and you're watching it with your dad, I'm not even sure I'm not even sure I totally understood, where the Chase Park Plaza was,
Right.
uh, when I was 7 years old,
Um,
8, 9, 10.
kind of tapering off of that, I had the chance to kind of, in a really weird way, just kind of communicate with you at NWA 73, through the
Yep.
across the barricade, which was a really
Right.
cool story. But
Right.
you know, switching gears a little bit, as somebody who grew up in St. Louis but was maybe too young or didn't have the resources at the time to experience wrestling at the Chase, experience the Chase Park Plaza, what did it mean for you as a fan for Billy Corgan in the NWA to finally bring wrestling back to the Chase, bring that promotion back to where it was considered what was arguably its home base in its heyday, to finally get to experience that now as an adult? Did it was it did it kind of like bring some closure on that, or was it just kind of a fun experience, or what did it mean to you for that?
Well, first of all, let me say it is not arguable. Uh, St. Louis was the centerpiece, the heartbeat. I love the topic. I love the debate, and I know every kid that grew up in Memphis and Charlotte and wherever, they all thought their town was the most special. But I think we all know the truth. Uh, so that being said, uh, I'll share a story with you in a minute if I could.
Go
But
ahead, please.
to answer your question, um, I would not have missed being in attendance for NW 73 for. I mean, look, I am not someone of considerable wealth.
Right.
I'm glad I didn't have to pay more than $100 a ticket, but I would have paid 1,000. So missing the show was not an option.
Gotcha.
So that show meant to me everything you said plus more. It and when you say closure, um, that won't necessarily have to be the case, but we don't need to talk
Yeah.
about that right now.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
um,
I'm hoping they come back to the Chase, but I mean, just
yeah,
kind of that whole like, wow,
sure,
I finally got to see
yeah,
wrestling at the Chase. Closure on that. Well, what if sort of
yeah,
thing.
sure. So, but what it meant to me and what it meant to a lot of people, I'm speaking for everyone who had a family experience, whether it was an older brother, an uncle, parents, sisters, I don't care what it is. The family experience, I think for a lot of us in the early 1970s and mid 1970s, is what I went for. I went back there to thank the NWA, my dad, all that kind of thing. So my dad's no longer with us, but my point was I wasn't missing the show. That was just
Absolutely.
not happening. And if I would have had to fly in, I would have flown in. And if I would have had to drive more than 2 hours, I would have driven more than 2 hours. But God willing, thankfully it worked out. There was
Absolutely.
no one sick. Jobs didn't get in the way, nothing got in the way, and I could be here. So I'm very thankful for that. So that story I wanted to share with you. You mentioned Cape Championship Wrestling.
Yes.
So my interest and my passion is in the area of putting on events. I want to put on events, and I've been putting on events for 16 years now, and I want people to gather so you and I can reach across the rail and say hello. I want people to come to my events where they can gather and enjoy like-minded uh, experiences. And I want them to bring friends, and I want them to bring family, and I want them to do it on an annual basis, something where someone in St. Louis or in Springfield or in Cape Girardeau can say, every year my brother and I go to Cape Comic Con. Every year my dad and I, my mom and I, my sister and I. So these are the things that I put on for these reasons, and it just so happens that for me, my interest and my passion lie in when I first started going to Comic Cons back in the '90s, and I knew that was something I wanted to do. So when I became a promoter of events, I think I think I immediately started thinking there will be a day. There will be a day where I will promote live wrestling. I think that came pretty quickly, maybe 10 years ago or so. And 5 or 6 years, 6 years ago,
Okay.
6 years ago, through Larry Matisick, I reached
Okay.
out. I reached out to Herb Simmons, and I said, Herb, I came up, I met him, and we had lunch. I said, Herb, can you help me put on a live wrestling show in concert with Cape Comic Con in April? He said, sure. He said, tell me what you want, and I'll put it together. So I told him what I wanted, and he put it together, and we used it as what I like to call content or programming. Cape Comic Con is a 3-day event, but I want people to come and be able to experience a lot of different things. So a pro wrestling event was one of them. So that was a great experience. It went really well. I'll always be appreciative to SICW and to Herb Simmons. But shortly after Herb left, I called him and I said, Herb, I'm getting my promoter's license and I'm creating Cape Championship Wrestling. And he said, Ken, all the best to you. And if I can ever help you, all you got to do is call. So in the last 5 years, I have called, and he has been supportive. So getting back to that, I founded Cape Championship Wrestling and quickly brought on a couple of partners that had a lot more experience in promoting pro wrestling. One fella out of Memphis and one locally here in Cape, and then the three of us formed a partnership, and we ran 40 events in 5 years. And then
Wow.
I stepped away last year. But I still will promote something with CCW, Cape Championship Wrestling. Um, so I still feel like, to some degree, I'm still involved in promoting wrestling, and I certainly have wrestlers at Cape Comic Con every year, going back about 7 or 8 years.
So before
So
you go, go ahead.
and the one thing I wanted to, I'm sorry, the one thing I wanted to share as it relates to the NWA. Um, 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Nick Aldis was in his first run before he had dropped the title to Cody in
Hmm.
Chicago. I had Nick Aldis in Cape Pardo, and I can't be completely sure of this. Nick may have wrestled some matches for Harley. Uh, I don't know for sure, but I think I promoted uh, an NWA World Championship bout, and I was the first one to do that in 30 something years.
Okay. In Cape Girardeau,
So
or just
yeah, in Cape,
okay,
no, in Missouri,
okay, okay, okay.
Now
Gotcha.
again, please, I'm totally fine to be corrected because I don't know for sure,
Right.
but they left St. Louis in 84 or whatever it was, 85. Um, it was so it meant a lot to me to reach out to Nick Aldis and say, Nick, can I book you to defend the title in Cape Girardeau, Missouri in 2018 or 17? And he said, I'd love to. Let's put it together. So that's what the NWA means to me. It meant so much that I had to reach out to him and bring him into one of my shows.
Awesome. Uh,
So
going
there's
back,
my story. Yeah.
that's it's a good story. I unfortunately missed that one, so but I'm glad that. Always a pleasure to see Nick Aldis. He seems like a well. But real quick, we'll go on this tangent. What's Nick like to communicate with and work with?
Well, I'm glad you asked because there's that term. Here's something funny, Eli. I have a promoter's license and I promoted north of 40 professional wrestling events plus having them at wrestlers at my convention, and I do not often use terms that are what you would consider insider terms.
Right.
I come from a time where we didn't know them. They weren't part of everyday lexicon. Uh, the business was secret. And I still respect that to the point that I just don't throw terms around. Now again, I know that sounds a little dramatic for 2021, but for someone to say I am such a mark for this person or this person, um, I didn't often go to the airport to pick up talent. but I absolutely went to the airport to pick up the NWA champion. So I arrived in St. Louis when his plane landed, and he gets off the plane, and we got 2 hours, maybe almost 3 hours total from the time he landed till the time we got in Cape Girardeau. And he was fascinating, very educated, very well spoken, um, nobody to trifle with. If you want to test Nick Aldis in or out of the ring, I think you're going to be. I think you're going to wish you didn't. Um, very respectful of the NWA, very respectful of the history of pro wrestling. Um, couldn't speak more highly of Nick Aldis. Professional from the moment he landed till the moment I put him in a car to go back to the airport in St. Louis. Nothing but professional. Couldn't have represented himself, his family, the NWA, uh, and I think he's a great in-ring performer. So
Absolutely.
I can't sing his praises any more than that.
Um, so you're a fan of wrestling. You're a fan of comic books. Growing up.
Yeah,
Um, when you were growing up, as you getting into high school and college, did you have this dream of promoting, or were you on a different path and then you went down the promoters route? What were you thinking? What led you to eventually become a promoter? Did
sure.
you did you take did you take college classes for it? Did you
Nothing
dream
like
of
that at
it?
all. No, nope, nothing like that at all. Keep in mind, in the 1970s, fan conventions were minuscule, and I mean just not the term Comic Con wasn't even coined until what, the late 1970s, early 80s. I don't even know. I mean, San Diego was founded in 1971, but the word convention would be San Diego Comic Book Convention. Then it became Comic Con International, and so that being said, no, I had never heard of a Comic Con till forever. Went to college here in Cape Girardeau, didn't study business, never thought about promoting events of any kind. Like I said, I bought an existing comic book store in 1994,
Okay.
and went to San Diego in 1998. So when I went to San Diego for the big convention out there, that's when I started thinking, yeah, I'll do this. I'll do something. I'll do something like this. It will not be on the scale. Again, the things I've done, and some of the things I've been fortunate enough to have people support me on. Um, I don't dream of selling out uh, a 30,000 seat, you know, venue. My goals and my plans are to draw the largest crowds that I can in my community. I don't see myself branching out too far than that. Now, that being said, we're very proud of the numbers we've drawn for my events here in my community. Um, so I knew I wanted to put together a comic book convention in the late 1990s, and got around to doing that a few years after 2000. And I don't think I ever. Yeah, I probably thought I would live event that I would promote. Probably 12 years ago is
Okay.
what I really thought I wanted to, and I got a chance to see Herb and watch Herb work and put that show together, and kind of he brought me along that process over the course of about 8 weeks to 12 weeks, and I said, oh yeah, I can do this.
You mentioned that you went to San Diego.
Yeah,
Tell me what San Diego's like. I know that's sort of like it's like for a wrestling fan, you got to go to WrestleMania once. For a comic fan, you got to go to San Diego once, even if you're not a WWE fan or you hear the stories of San Diego being so big you can't appreciate the con, but you got to go once. What was
yeah.
your experience like in San Diego?
I think those are great analogies. Although I've not been to WrestleMania, I think those are great analogies, and I think that's very true. I went to San Diego prior to the huge Marvel Studios explosion. So I understand now in the last 16, 17 years, Hollywood has obviously um, joined joined San Diego Comic Con, and the larger media presence is due to the billions of dollars worth of box office business that major studios now do with these characters, both Marvel and DC. That being, or even that for that matter, television, that brought Walking Dead to life and things like that.
Right.
So that being said, my experience in the very very late 1990s in San Diego was, yeah, I mean, it's hard to put into words. It's if you stood at Cape Comic Con and you've looked north, south, east, and west, so multiply that by 50.
Wow.
You know, you know, and then realize that you're somewhere in the building with Robert Downey Jr. and this person and that person. It's overwhelming. It really is. It's overwhelming, but it's overwhelming in a good sense. Um,
Gotcha.
there's sensory overload. You also realize you're in a building with 300,000 people. Um, so WrestleMania times three as it relates to the people. I'm talking about the Michigan. The WrestleMania 3.
Right.
If they there's three times that many people, and you're in a convention center that's the size of, gosh, I don't know, it's not the size of Cape Girardeau, but it's pretty close. you know it's overwhelming, man. It really is, but it's beautiful. It's well put together, and you can see everything in a 12-hour day, and you can go home and not have seen nearly all you wanted to. You can meet 50 really cool people that you had this connection with, and yet there were another teen people that you could have met and had more interactions with. It's grandiose on top of grandiose on top of grandiose. I really don't know how else to put it any other words than that.
Um, you mentioned you went to other conventions,
Yeah,
both as a dealer and
yeah,
as a fan.
yeah.
So, from the fan perspective, were you just what sort of con goer were you? Because some I and even with 2020 being what it was, I still kept my Comic Con convention streak going with Cape Comic Con, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
like I'm kind of I go there for the guests, but then after I meet a couple of the guests that I really want to meet, then I see comic vendors, and then I see
Yeah.
artists. What sort of fan were you? Were you kind of there for the movie stars? Were you there for vendors? Were you there for the writers and artists? What
So
kind of
I
fan
think
were
I,
you?
I think my interests have changed over the years. I truly do. Um, Originally, I was there for the vendors and piecing my collection and looking for some really cool gems, some key books here and there. Um, and then so that would have been my initial would be checking out the merchandise, checking out the vendors. What did I really want to? What did I want to find? What comic book or what action figure statue? What did I want to find? Then as I went on with my career in retail with comic books and a collectible store, um, I became more interested and then when I opened Cape Comic Con, I became much more interested in meeting the artists and writers. You then kind of switch hats, and you really want to meet the artists and writers who create the books, because again, for the first 10 years and maybe up until now, that was a huge, huge piece of Cape Comic Con to actually bring in these creators. And so I was networking that for a lot of years. Um, I am not a huge celebrity uh, media television kind of meet the actors kind of guy. There's been a few. I drove to Lexington, Kentucky for one reason and one reason only, and that was to meet Lee Majors from the $6 Million Man, and I did that about 5 or 6 years ago.
Let's say, I believe I was at
Uh,
that convention. I didn't meet Lee Majors, but I believe
no,
I was also at that convention.
yeah, and then I guess now, now it's really funny because now I'm in a situation now where um, meeting wrestlers is kind of my newest passion. If I haven't met you before, I'd like to shake hands and get a picture now. So, I missed out on a few because they're sadly no longer with us. But That's kind of where I'm at now. With if I go to a show, I'm probably wanting to know what wrestlers are. If they're go to an indie wrestling show, or and who's doing the meet and greets and who's going to be there for the meet and greets. That's kind of a big deal for me. Um, I'm not going to say too much about this, but I will say that in 2022, I will expand my promotion business to other events, other than Cape Comic Con and Cape Anime Con. So kind of keep an eye out for that and see what else I'll do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we touched on this earlier. Your passion for getting people together, getting fans
Yep.
together,
Hmm.
like-minded people together.
Hmm.
You eventually decide I'm gonna bring a Comic Con to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which is not, I know I have some listeners that aren't from the Southern Illinois, Southeast Missouri area. Cape is a nice town. I mean,
Hmm.
it's got a shopping mall, it's got a good hospital, it's got some good places to eat, but it's if you're from Chicago or New York or Orlando, you're gonna be culture shocked in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. But
What? Yeah.
what makes what whenever you decide you were gonna bring an event like this, which is known for the big cities, into a smaller sort of city, like what were the challenges?
Oh,
What was the
well,
things going through your head, and what was like kind of the whole like experience, like the logistics? Take me through all that.
I thought you were going to ask me why Cape Girardeau, and that's very simple. I live here. This is my, and I don't mean that flippantly. I mean, like, I take ownership of this community. Um, I want to see this community grow, and whether it is a new business, um, a, a, a new entertainment complex, a new event, growth is why I put Cape Comic Con here. Um, we live in a community of 35,000, but we live in an extended community of 250,000. And those 250,000 either have to go to Memphis or St. Louis to the next larger city from us. And we say in my community and in our chamber of commerce and our business and community leaders say we want those 250,000 to at least have an option to go to a university sporting event, a Cape Comic Con, a whatever event, a nice restaurant here in Cape, as opposed to going to St. Louis or Memphis. Um, so that was the reason why. Oh, the logistics were hilarious. I mean, the logistics are silly. Um, when you have to fly someone to St. Louis and then pick them up and drive them to Cape, people are like, "What? Why would I do that?" Um, most people don't know where Cape Girardeau is. So then you have to sell a talent or an agent on exactly where you are. And then their first thought is, well, why do I want to go there? Why would anyone who is talent come here when they can go to those cities you mentioned, or another 50 cities, or another 100 cities around the country, that can offer them as much or more than I can? Well, not everyone's getting those invites. Not every actor or performer or wrestler or artist or writer out there, not all of them are getting invites to the big shows or the bigger shows. Let me also share this with you that may surprise you.
Go ahead.
In the first year of Cape Comic Con, I only know, and now please hear me out. When I say comic book convention, I don't mean those cool comic book shows at the Shrewsbury that have been around for 40 years, where the diehard comic fans go. Those are really cool and really wonderful, and I love them myself. But when I think about a convention, I'm talking about with guest writers, guest artists, uh, larger media, television and film, voice acting, plus programming, rooms where there are panels and workshops and tutorials, and people showing independent film. Those to me are conventions. And the only one in Missouri. other than mine, my first year was Kansas City.
Really?
So
So this was
that's
before
how
St. Louis was having anything, or
St. Louis did not have an annual convention. And again, I I want to be careful because I don't, um, our friends in Maryland Heights did a show for 3 or 4 years called Project Comic Con, and that was in the early 2000s, maybe 2004 to 2008, something like that. I don't know for sure. Um, Wizard World was not even thought of yet until till the early to mid 2000s. Certainly not throughout the 90s and early 2000s. There was no Wizard World. Wizard World came out of Chicago Comic Con, and the first Wizard World St. Louis was long after my show started. Um, yeah, I mean, now there's a show in Joplin and Hannibal and Poplar Bluff and Perryville, and there's probably 20 in Missouri, 20 legitimate Comic Cons in Missouri.
wow.
So so that being said, I could have taken it to St. Louis, but I had no interest whatsoever.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
so kind of in the same token as that, and that was your first convention. We touched on it a little bit. You mentioned that you have to sell a talent on Cape
Yeah.
to get them to come, and I feel like this is the one. This is the one part that just on a personal level fascinates
Sure.
me the most because when I first started going to conventions, I'm going to the Wizard Worlds, and I'm just like emailing Wizard World or emailing GalaxyCon or Lexington or wherever, like, why don't you book such and such? Why isn't he here? Why aren't you booking Kevin Conroy? He was Batman. Why aren't you booking Ricky
let me
Steamboat? He was great. This, that, and the other.
let me
And
ask you. Let me ask you. Do they all answer you back within 24 hours?
I got a couple generic answer backs at some point, but
Okay.
got on the same, like, in my naivete, especially with like those that kind of are more corporately ran. I'm like, they could snap their fingers and hey, they have some guy from Doctor Who, at their convention. Why can't they snap their fingers and get Kevin Conroy, who's a voice actor, or get
Yep.
Michael Rosenbaum, who he's not really doing anything right now, but he was on Justice League and Smallville, and he was great. Why can't they just get that? And Ricky Steamboat, he's not on the road anymore, so you should be able to get him easily. And that's my fandom naivete.
No, that's reasonable. I
Oh,
mean, it's reasonable, and I get that question once a week all year. Um, but there's usually pretty good reasons why.
I was gonna say, how hard is it to actually book these people? I don't think it's just the snap of a fingers and like, yeah, I'll get Ricky on the phone and he's gonna be here. What
No,
is
it's
it
really.
like to
Let me
book?
let me say this: it's really hard. And here's kind of what I can say about how difficult it is. Um, and it's changed. It's changed a lot. Um, 15 years ago, comic book writers and artists didn't have agents. By and large, they didn't have agents. Today, they all have agents. Um, yeah. So 15 years ago, I don't think there was an IMDb. There may have been. So you had to actually try to navigate how you find agents and how you get a hold of agents. And keep in mind, 25 years ago, um, agents weren't really familiar, or actors weren't really familiar with working Comic Con scenes. They were trying to be booked on commercials for soap or uh, acting roles. And as the Comic Cons and what they call signing appearances, and yeah, they've been around longer than I'm maybe leading on, but again, relatively new. So how hard, man? It's just hard. So I would use Ricky Steamboat, but let's use Jason David Frank.
Okay, yeah, he was met him at my first convention, so this is a really good one.
He's the perfect person to discuss this topic. Jason David Frank gets an invite to 5 cons a week, 40 weeks a year. So that's 200 Comic Cons. That's globally. That's not just in the U.S. That's globally. It may be more than that because I am talking globally. Hell, it may be that many in the U.S. I don't know. So he has to choose one. He can, he's got to choose one, right? So I'm competing with 5 to 7 to 8 others just for my week. Just for my week, if I can get a hold of him, he's got others just to choose from. Just pick. So there are so many events that it's hard to get their attention. It's hard to get them to notice you and to come see you. And then the law of supply and demand is truly what we have to understand wins out at the end. So if he has 8 and he says my fee to come to a Comic Con is 20 grand, and he has 8 that all say 20, well, he's probably going to say who will pay 25, and then he'll get to the one that can pay the most. That's supply and demand. So it is not easy. Ricky Steamboat gets invited to a lot of wrestling shows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that answered your question.
Oh yeah, it does. Again, being young and
Yeah.
thing is just a matter of I'll work for 10 grand. Okay, I got 10. Here's your flight information. That's not exactly in
So
a
that
perfect world that's how it works, but that's not how
and
it
it's worked
works.
it's worked for me when I've gotten lucky and the he or she has that weekend free and they're not Jason David Frank because he has no weekends free. He
Right.
can choose not to work, but the minute he says I'm working that weekend, every con on the planet sends him an invitation. So yes, you have to then say who's not quite as in demand, who's a little less in demand. Then everyone out there, and I don't think I'm throwing you into that category, but those out there that say, Ken, I just don't understand why you can't get John Cena. Well, Vince doesn't let anyone. If Vince has a lockdown on your favorite wrestlers you watch on TV every Monday and Friday, sure, I'd love to have him too, but that's not even an option. If I could afford John Cena, which I am certain I cannot, if I if I could afford John Cena, that's not even part of his possibilities. Then when actors are working, I have a little bit of knowledge on this, but I can't tell you. I've never worked on a TV show more than 1 week. But if you are an actor on a TV show like Smallville and Michael Rosenbaum,
Right.
Michael Rosenbaum worked 24 weeks a year, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. Now, during that time Smallville was on television, those 10 years, yeah, he's not going to come to Cape Girardeau or anywhere on a Saturday after working 60 hours that week and making a ton of money, by the way. I don't feel bad for Michael Rosenbaum. My point is he's only off half the year. And, if he's filming the week of your con, there's no chance.
And if there is a chance, you better be willing to pay, and I mean pay, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I think working actors and actresses, if you're on the set and you're working, you can imagine how much money you get paid. Well, that's the kind of money you're going to want to go do something else. You're not going to want to take less money. It's still a day's work.
Right.
Now, a day's work's a day's work. Now, where we've had to start and where a lot of shows start that are smaller is who's not working, And if you're not working, you're probably available and needing to make some money.
Right.
So it makes life a little easier. But again, that's not Daryl from Walking Dead, and that's not those guys. Those guys are working. So again, these are just things. But I do love it when someone emails me and says, "Hey, can you get so and so?" Because it shows me that they're interested in my show, and it shows that they'd like to see my show do well, and I want to know who people want to see. So I love the more emails I get. I don't care what they're asking me. The more emails I get, the better.
Um, Kind of off in the same vein of that is, have you ever gotten like a, I'd like to think in my younger days, whenever I would email conventions going bring so and so, I wasn't quite. I was shooting for just moderate people that I liked. I wasn't go shooting for your John Cena's or your Norman Reedus's or anything like that. Has there
Right.
ever been somebody who's been like, hey, bring in? Like I said, Ricky Steamboat, and you're like, you know what? He might be off. Let me try it, and then lo and behold, you get, hey, Ricky Steamboat, will you come? And then you book Ricky Steamboat or
Sure.
whoever. Has anybody ever made a suggestion and you're like, that's a good idea, and then it paid off or anything like that?
Well, I would say absolutely it's happened. Now, to tell you exactly who, what, when, and where, I don't know if I can do that off the top of my head.
Right.
But for sure that's happened. Absolutely. Both from the wrestling standpoint with CCW and with Cape Comic Con. Someone's brought up a good idea, and I'm like, hang on. Let me see if I can find their agent and get them on the phone, and let's see what we can make happen. Everything comes from an idea or a suggestion, right?
Right.
I mean, everything comes from that. Um, you make some people really happy when those things come to life, and you go, "Yep, that's who I'm getting." And hopefully, you make a lot of people happy.
Um.
So I don't know. There was a comic book artist, and I won't give his name. There was a comic book artist 10 years ago uh, that I think there was something. We were friends on Facebook, and I don't know if it's still a thing or not because I'm not doing that right now. But there was a little box that said they were online. They were on Facebook, and it was 2 in the morning. And I said, "Hey, man, sorry to be intrusive, but I do a comic book convention in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Would you be interested in coming?" And he said, "Sure." Like that's how it happened. And he
Nice.
was and he was an A-lister.
Really.
Yeah, and I just couldn't even believe you felt like you were in some weird Twilight thing. It was like, what just happened?
Um. So,
Yeah.
uh, you've had a lot of cool people at your convention. Last year you had uh, Darby Allen, Sammy
Mm-hmm.
Guevara.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you've had a lot of different actors, actresses. You had John Wesley Shipp there, which was a personal favorite of mine, especially when he had that little renaissance on the New Flash as well. You've dealt with quite a few wrestlers and actors and actresses throughout the
Yeah.
course of your time promoting this convention.
Yeah.
Not not gonna go negative and ask for like the bad stories, but I'm just like, who were some of the ones that you can think of off the top of your head that were like, that guy was great, or that girl was great, or that wrestler was awesome? That was just like, if you can think of the one that if somebody else in a similar situation to you were trying to put on a convention, go like, get this person, they're great.
Yeah. I, I will do that, and I will tell you their names. My only concern is I'm going to forget someone, and I hate that thought.
So
But let me tell you something.
say for the record, he did not mean to disrespect you if he forgot you. We'll put that
Yeah,
that disclaimer
for
in
sure.
now.
John Wesley Shipp was fantastic. Like a warm, fantastic person. Like
Absolutely.
whether he never set foot on a TV studio camera, never. He's great. He was great. Terry Funk was just amazing. Um, Reb Brown, who played Captain America on the CBS films in '79 and '81, I believe. Um, One of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. Just a true gentleman. Um, Gosh, I don't know. Billy Tucci's like, so they say never meet your heroes.
Right.
I have three artist heroes, comic book artist heroes. I've met all three of them. Two of them have been to Cape Girardeau, so two of three have been in Cape Girardeau, and they were both Billy Tucci and Greg Land were both the nicest people in the world. Um, Darby Allen was really young people. Darby and Sammy are just these young, energetic fellas. Like I just love being in their company. I kind of was trying to get some youth off of them, you know.
Right.
Um, no, they were great. They were great. They were great. I told you about my time with Nick Aldis,
Yeah.
Hardy. These are just really good. These are really cool people to work with, and that's what CCW was. That was work. I mean, so Cape Comic Con is an appearance and it is work, but when they come to wrestle for you, that is really what they do for a living. That is like so it's if it's not a signing, which is a form of their work. When you book a wrestler to come in and do a wrestling show, that's just all work. That's just work. And these guys were great to work with. It was great to work with Matt Hardy. It was great to work with Nick Aldis. It was great to work with whoever.
Right.
Yeah. No, I've met a lot of really cool people.
Um, I don't want to be negative, but do you have anybody? Don't mention their names. Don't mention their names. We're gonna be diplomatic.
Yeah,
But
of course. Life is man. Of course, in working relationships, things sometimes are difficult. Sure.
do you have any just like I mean like not like in the bad like f this and f that guy kind of story, but do you have like one where censoring names just kind of go like this person was just this way and it was crazy and it was ridiculous? Anything that you feel comfortable sharing from that perspective?
Well, I'll be as cautious as I can, and I'm not going to give you the name, of course. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, both from more so from the wrestling world.
Gotcha.
I can't think of anyone from the Comic Con side, but I think it's because it's a different type of work environment.
Sure.
When it's true, they're again, if those people from Comic Con came in and they were writing comics and doing the artwork right there to put a book together, it may be a little more stressful. If I book an actor who has to come in and do a scene, which they don't, of course, but if I was doing a TV show and I booked an actor, I would be like the director guy or whatever, and that would be way more different work relationship. So probably the more difficult ones, just because again it's a true working relationship, were probably from the wrestling side, but nobody that I wouldn't break bread with. No, absolutely not. Nobody that I wouldn't meet on the street corner and give them a hug and say hello, how are you? No, I don't. I mean, if you can't manage, I mean, if I feel like I can manage my life and people well enough in most any circumstance that I can't imagine getting a situation where it gets any worse than that. So nothing, no dirt to tell.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, that's good at least.
difficult moments,
Gotcha.
but nothing you can't get by in the moment.
Um, so we've talked a lot about Cape Comic Con's past, but when we're recording this before the convention and it's gonna be made public the week of the convention, what sort of things do we have to look forward to at Cape Comic Con this year? And if maybe there's somebody who listens to this that's from the area or maybe even from a further away area, if you wanted to let them know about what kind of cool stuff about your con there is to offer and maybe convince them to make that last minute trip. Now the floor is yours to do that.
Well, I guess I would say this. One of the things I'm most excited about this year is this year I've moved the needle toward a direction that is more pop culture centric. I don't know that I've never wanted to call Cape Comic Con a pop culture event. I want to call it a Comic Con. But this year, when I had the opportunity to book Jerry Bathers and Tony Dow from the historic classic TV series Leave It to Beaver, I did that. And I think there are going to be people who hear this right now or have seen it in print or in social media or on the news that say, I literally have to go to this event just for that reason. Uh, and that may be something I look at more in the future. So that's one new door that I've opened for Cape Comic Con this year. I'm a big fan of AEW, so I will continue to try to layer AEW performers every year. Uh, and I had this year I moved heaven and earth to try to get Britt Baker to join me with Rebel. I just couldn't make it happen, and that was frustrating. But Rebel from AEW will be with this year, and I'm a fan of her work. I think she makes a tremendously well suited second to Britt Baker.
Oh yeah.
Um, the Power Rangers have been very good. I will tell you, in the first 10 years of Cape Comic Con, other than Jason David Frank, it didn't really occur to me to reach out to book uh, Power Rangers. But the first 2 years in 2019 and 2020, they were so instrumental in the success of the events that I booked a Power Ranger for this year as well, and that's Catherine Sutherland, who replaced Amy Jo Johnson, and she is part of the Mighty Morphin lexicon. Um, Cape Cape Girardeau Cape Anime Con is my second event. I created a second event back in 2019, and I was able to do it in 2019 and just a couple of months ago. And that is moving forward. That will be the second event on the calendar every year for my promotion company. And because Cape Anime Con has been so strong out of the box, I did book a voice actor, Austin Tyndall, for this year's Cape Comic Con. So you'll see a little bit of that layer of anime and wrestling and pop culture. The comic book side this year is kind of the comic book men. Kevin Smith's team from AMC TV's The Comic Book Men. They are kind of anchoring the comic book love of Cape Comic Con this year. Um, so, so I hope that I hope those who come out enjoy the show. I know it sure looks good to me, and it's been a pleasure to promote this event this year. Even though we're still not past COVID, I was hoping we would be, but since we're not, we still have that hanging over us. But it's still been, working on Cape Comic Con, the worst day is still better than most days working for a job for me. So I've
Awesome.
enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to October 1st, launching Cape Comic Con for 2021. And then the future, again, probably opening a little bit more doors to the pop culture world, and expanding 1 to 2 more annual events along with Cape Comic Con and Cape Anime Con. And if you were listening close enough, you can probably figure wrestling's going to be one of those events.
I'm I'm all for that. I'm
Yep,
definitely all for that. So, Ken, thank you so much for doing this. And I know we're kind of in the home stretch as you're getting ready for the convention. So I know you're a busy man and you got a lot going on. But so I want to thank you for doing this. But uh, again, in case somebody just heard those names and want to make the trip, you have any social media or a website to tell them how to get tickets or how
sure.
to find out more info?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you. I'm never too busy. Anytime someone wants to talk or bring me on to promote my event, first of all, I'm thankful and I'm appreciative to you and your listeners. So thank you so much for having me on. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I am at Cape Comic Con on Facebook, and my website is cape-con.com. Tickets are available there. October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, Drury Plaza Hotel.
Okay, and definitely, if you're in the area and you're not working or all life has dealt you a good hand for that weekend, I definitely encourage you to check this event out. It is a good event. I was there last year. I can't recommend it. It especially if you're like me and you want to buy a whole lot of stuff that you don't need, but you help out some local artists. This is the place to do it. Um, but yeah, definitely check it out. It is a good time. It keeps its intimacy, which
Yeah.
is something that I do appreciate. Not that I don't love the bigger conventions, but you definitely make more friends at this convention than you would a big one. So that's in my opinion, but
Yeah.
that's just my testimony.
I appreciate that. I think that's all true. Let me add, it does not come with a big con price tag. It's $15 to get in.
$15, and lots of you know, lots of great comic vendors, lots of local artists. I,
Yes.
I met a local artist there last year who was actually on this show. So shout out to Polly Lene, who was I met, and she was gracious enough to do this show. Um, and yeah, I can't recommend it enough. Go to CapeCon, CapeCon.com,
Cape-con.com.
Cape-con.com.
Yep.
Get your tickets, check it out.
You can Google it or you can see it on Facebook. Either one.
Do that, and definitely give it a shot. And continue. If you're not from the area, support your local con, because this is how these are. That's how you know you can get these celebrities to come to places like Cape or your local con by supporting your local one. So definitely do that as well. Thank you to Ken for doing this, and if you enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe for more content. Uh, just like Cape Comic Con, from all different realms of geek culture, comic books, wrestling, anime, and follow me on my social media pages, facebook.com/athleticgeek89, Instagram athleticgeek89, and athletic_geek89 on Twitter. Check out Cape Comic Con, and thanks again to Ken Murphy. We'll see you at the con.